Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Compliance4All's live webinar on ATC radar approach control. My name is Michael, and I'll be your host for today's session. And on behalf of the Compliance4All team, I'd like to thank you all for being part of today's session. Today's webinar is being presented by Mr. Stephen Alvania. Before we start off today's session, a few words about our speaker, Stephen. He's had over 30 years of experience with the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, and he's also a certified air traffic controller at an airport traffic control tower and a radar approach control and an enroute ATC center. And he's also led the development and deployment of the National Traffic Flow Management System. And he's also worked as a technical research program manager for multiple advanced ATC capabilities, and also he's a FAA HQ ATC procedure specialist. And his expertise includes aviation committee staff for the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, ATC subject matter expert for ASAP Census Corporation, and also currently Stephen is the owner of Air Traffic Consulting Systems LLC. And we are honored to have Stephen with us today to present today's webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start off today's session, I'd like to quickly inform you of the program outline. This webinar is for a 90-minute duration. First, Stephen will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas he would cover and then share with you his presentation. And also, we would like to inform all our participants today that once part of today's teleconference, you're being placed on mute and would remain so until the Q&A begins. We have a couple of minutes at the end for your question and answers, but if you do come up with questions during the session, please post your questions in the Q&A panel or the chat messenger. And for any reason, ladies and gentlemen, if you do get logged out of today's session, please follow the same procedure to join in again. Now that we're all ready, I request Stephen to take it from you. Stephen?
Thank you, Michael. Am I coming in okay?
Absolutely, Stephen.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to the webinar. Michael's done a good job of going through this, so I'll just skip this section and get on to the objective. And the objective here is this, and we've all heard the expressions about there are things that you know, things you know you don't know, things you don't know you know, and things you don't know that you don't know, which is the one that is the most problematic. So that's why I want to focus on teaching people or exposing people to things that they really don't know about the ATC system. The question is, well, why do I want to do that? Okay, well, the first thing is I'm assuming that everybody who here has a professional interest in understanding the ATC system, and to a level that is fairly significant and at least can that has a sense of appreciation for what the system really is, beyond your curiosity or an interest in it. And oops, why did that? That's was supposed to do that. There we go. And one of the things that, the reason why I'm doing this is the system's like an iceberg. You know, people see it out there and say, oh, it's beautiful and it works well and all this type of thing. But most of the complexity and most of the messiness, you know, and also most of the beauty of the system lies beneath the waterline and is not obvious to an observer. You can ask questions, you can do this, you can do that, but there's still many parts of the system that most people don't know about how it works. And I experienced that when I was the subject matter expert. People would be asking me questions, we'll be talking about something, and something would come up, and I'd be curious, well, why aren't they asking me about this? So I would offer, offer the information, and I began to realize they didn't know to ask the question. You know, so the thought to asking the question never occurred to them. So that's when I began to get on a mission here to kind of help people understand those things that they don't know. And the reason why it's important is that an incomplete understanding of the operational problems, and that's what I'm focusing on too, is not so much the technology or the mechanics or the logistics, but the operational problems. And if you don't understand those well, if you don't have a full appreciation for the messiness of the system and its elegance, that can lead to flawed technical solutions that you offer the agency or in the development of new technologies. They're flawed because they've simplified the problem and really haven't addressed the hard stuff, you know, the messy stuff that makes things so much more complicated. But if you don't do that, or if you do that, then what you produce is something that is limited and insufficient utility to the users. They're saying, well, okay, that's fine what you're doing, but I need to do more. I need you to help me with the hard part. And once they begin to get the sense that you have left out the hard part, then they lose confidence in you as a developer. And at that point, that's kind of like strike three, and at that point, it's very difficult to regain the confidence of the customer. Okay, so I want to kind of help people understand that complexity so they can be more credible, have a better understanding and more appreciation for what the controllers or the users of the system are actually facing. In today's, we're going to discuss, the terminal radar approach control, the TRACON operations. A few weeks ago, we had one, the initial webinar on some of the basic concepts of ATC that underlie all this. So we've kind of covered a lot of that, and I'll start from there and work on now focusing in on a particular facility type. So people who didn't attend that, it shouldn't be a real loss, but may make it a little bit more difficult now to kind of follow what I'm saying. Not really difficult, but just a little more difficult. Anyway, so let's get on with that. And before we do, though, I just wanted to, I put this in all my briefings just to make sure I don't get sued by somebody. This is not, an official proposal or concept or direction to anybody. The views I present here are my own, based upon all these years of experience and observation and just interaction with all these people. But I don't represent anybody. I don't represent the government, the business associations, or unions, or anybody else. Okay. The next thing I want to say is what I'm going to be going through here is not to show you how they run traffic at Chicago or Los Angeles or a particular airport. Every airport is completely unique. It's very much, they're all the same, but yet they're all very, very unique. So if you need that kind of information, it's best to go there, talk to people who work there, and get that level of detail and currency. What I'm going through here is a sense to kind of show you what the context is, what they're facing, that applies to all facilities, not just a particular facility someplace. And the last thing is, here is I use a lot of videos and a lot of games here to try to get the idea across. And I use them because I find them to be the most useful for what I need, as far as getting people to understand. And it shouldn't be construed as a kind of an official endorsement of them. There's sort of many, many of these out there. These are the ones that I've come across that I find most useful. So I use them for my own personal preferences. I have talked to them, get their approval, but I'm not being paid or anything else by anybody else. So don't take these as endorsements, just suggestions or thoughts on my part. Okay, let's get started. Okay, to rehash a little bit, like I said last time, there's these 5 facility types in the ATC system. The flight service stations, the towers, TRACON centers, and the command center. The first one, the flight service stations, which used to be at all these airports. That's where pilots got all their services and filed their flight plans, got their weather, type of thing. That's now done basically online. And it also still is the center of the facility efforts to do search and rescue if that's ever required. But it's now done online primarily, and it is not a control facility. It's an information service. It's many, many services. In fact, it does more for pilots than ATC does, but it does not control the airplanes. So basically, we can just kind of eliminate that one as being part of the 4, which leaves these 4. Okay, and first one is the tower, which we all have seen before, the big tall structure there. And that provides a rolling flow of traffic between the runways and the parking areas, back and forth. Departures going out, arrivals coming in. Okay, the next one down would be the TRACON, which we're talking about today. This one is right here, the base of the tower in this particular configuration. Many airports, with technology nowadays, it doesn't really matter where they are. They used to be right there beneath the tower cab because of technology. But then as you could do with more data, they moved them down here, then off the airport, and now they could be almost anywhere. But what these facilities do are provide the separation and sequencing services at or about or near the major airport, or airport or airports. So it's the close-in, detailed separation and sequencing of traffic near major areas. The next one down is the centers, of which there are 20, and this is basically the
Hello everyone, welcome to Compliance for All live webinar
on accounting and tax procedures to maximize your deductions and minimize problems with the IRS. My name is Johnson, and I'm going to be a host for today's session. On behalf of the Compliance4All team, I would like to thank you for being a part of today's event. Today's webinar will be presented by Mr. Ruben Rubinson. Mr. Rubinson is a CPA and has been licensed since 1979. He has received his MBA from New York University in 1977. He has been preparing tax returns for over 40 years and will be preparing the 2013 tax returns for approximately 150 individuals, 50 businesses, and 7 nonprofits. He currently acts as a Chief Financial Officer for 7 companies and consults with numerous others. He previously worked as a CFO or VP Finance for 3 publicly traded startup companies and has been responsible for accounting, IT, and human resources departments, developed policies and procedures, performed in-house legal reviews, and filed governmental reports and returns. We are honored to have such a distinguished person such as Mr. Rubinson with us to present today's webinar. Before we begin, I would like to inform you of the program outline for this training session. This webinar is for 90 minutes duration. First, Mr. Rubinson will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas that would be covered, and he would then share with you his presentation. We'd like to inform all our participants once part of the teleconference have been placed on mute and will remain so until the Q&A begins towards the end of the webinar. We also request all to hold back your questions until the Q&A window begins. 10 minutes of time will be allotted for the Q&A, during which your questions will be answered. If for any reason you are logged out of this training session or teleconference, please follow the same procedure to join in again. Now that we are ready to start, I request Mr. Rubinson to take it from here. Mr. Rubinson?
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Johnson, and welcome everyone. And actually, one change to what Johnson said. I know you don't want to listen to me talking for over an hour straight, so I'm going to be pausing periodically to take questions after each section in that. So if you'd like to ask questions as we go along each section, please feel free to send them in, and then at the end we'll have an open question and answer as well. So let's start. Here's my course outline, and let's see. So you can see we're going to go over the introductory information and personal, which we've done, look at internal control and policies, procedures for your accounting system, and going down to minimizing your tax liability. The purpose of this webinar is to share with you the system I have developed over the last 30-plus years to help small businesses to, 1, properly prepare their books and records, 2, ensure they're recording all of their expenses and other deductions, and 3, accumulate the documentation necessary to verify the information for the IRS and, maybe in the future, assist in an audit of your financial statements. Let me emphasize at the outset that I purposely use the word procedures in the title of my webinar. I'd like everyone on the call to ask themselves, do I have a set of policies and procedures for my business and my accounting department? For those of you that have answered yes, ask yourself, how often do I check to see that these policies and procedures are being followed? As we spend the next hour and a half together, I would like you to compare the information I am presenting to what you are currently doing in your business. As I mentioned earlier, I have been a licensed CPA since 1979. I would also note that in addition to being a CPA and CFO, I'm a computer programmer, and I have worked as the head of an IT department for 5 years. You might be asking yourself, what does computer programming and understanding technology have to do with being a CPA or CFO, or with creating policies and procedures? Well, first, most companies create and maintain their books and records using a software program nowadays, rather than by hand or using spreadsheets. Next, there's a perfectionism a results-oriented questioning process with programming that is very helpful in developing policies and procedures. And lastly, there's a step-by-step logical thought process that goes into computer programming, which assists in analyzing a company's procedures. So everything we're talking about is logical, step-by-step, kind of like a flow chart. I'd like to start by defining what internal control is. According to the according to the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission, commonly known as COSO, internal control is broadly defined as a process effected by an entity's board of directors, management, and other personnel designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of objectives in the following categories. 1, effectiveness and efficiency of operations. 2, reliability of financial reporting. And 3, compliance with applicable laws and regulations. In this webinar, we are going to touch on the effectiveness of your operations and concentrate on the reliability of your financial reports and compliance with IRS regulations. Okay, how do we... Next, let's look at the policies and procedures that run your accounting department. Here are some of the basic policies you need to follow. Access to accounting information restricted. Committing the company to expenditures controlled. Authority to authorize transactions limited. Job descriptions are maintained for all employees and include their duties and responsibilities. Segregation of duties. Procedures developed to support these policies are tested. And financial procedures are reviewed on a regular basis. So now let's look at some of the specific procedures you can implement in connection with this. Accounting software access. The first decision you need to make is which software program or packages you are going to use. For many smaller companies, an all-in-one software package, such as QuickBooks or Peachtree, is sufficient. However, if you are in a specialized industry, it may be better to use 2 separate software programs. You need to first look for the software program that will best handle your industry, your business line. If the specialized program has a good accounting program included, or which can be integrated with it, great. If not, you can always use 2 different systems. As an example, I had a client that was an auto repair shop. He needed a specialized program that allowed him to track parts and prepare estimates for customers. It also generated bills with all of the detail he needed and recorded the customer payments, tracking accounts receivable. In his situation, we generated a report from the specialized software program on a weekly basis and input a 6-line journal entry into the main accounting software program. Who has access? In his case, the specialized software program was accessible by all of his employees. However, the accounting software was located on a different computer where only the owner and the accounting department had access. In most cases, you'll have one software package that handles everything for you. In this case, you'll need to set up a system of passwords and access so that each user only has access to the information they need to know. You also want to store the file on a secure computer and back it up on a regular basis. And you need to make sure users do not share their login information with other employees and that passwords are changed on a regular basis. As an aside, when you terminate an employee, in addition to the normal policy of retrieving their keys and company equipment, you also need to...
Hello everyone, welcome to Compliance4All live webinar on 1019 and W9 update, complying with IRS information reporting. My name is Ron and I'm going to be a host for today's session. On behalf of the Compliance4All team, I'd like to thank you all.
Hello everyone, welcome to Compliance4All
Today's
live webinar on accounting and tax procedures to maximize your deductions and minimize problems with the IRS.
Is a CPA and
My name is Johnson and I'm going to be a host for today's session. On behalf of the Compliance4All team, I would like to thank you for being a part of today's event. Today's webinar will be presented by Mr. Rubinson. Mr. Rubinson is a CPA and has been licensed since 1979. He has received his MBA from New York University in 1977. He has been preparing tax returns for over 40 years and will be preparing the 2013 tax returns for approximately 150 individuals, 50 businesses, and 7 nonprofits. He currently acts as a Chief Financial Officer for 7 companies and consults with numerous others. He previously worked as a CFO or VP Finance for 3 publicly traded startup companies and has been responsible for accounting, IT, and human resources departments, develop policies and procedures, perform in-house legal reviews, and file governmental reports and returns. We are honored to have such a distinguished person such as Mr. Rubinson with us to present today's webinar. Before we begin, I would like to inform you of the program outline for this training session. This webinar is for 90 minutes duration. First, Mr. Rubinson will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas that would be covered, and he will then share with you his presentation. We'd like to inform all our participants once part of the teleconference have been placed on mute and will remain so until the Q&A begins towards the end of the webinar. We also request all to hold back your questions until the Q&A window begins. 10 minutes of time will be allotted for the Q&A, during which your questions will be answered.
Welcome, everyone.
If for any reason you are logged out of this training session or teleconference, please follow the same procedure to join in again. Now that we are ready to start, I request Mr. Rubinson to take it from here.
Chat box anytime you want to.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Johnson, and welcome everyone. And actually, one change to what Johnson said. I know you don't want to listen to me talking for over an hour straight,
while we're talking,
so
and perhaps
I'm going to be
the topics
pausing
of question are
to
germane to the specific delivery at that moment, and I'll be happy to try to answer them at that time.
Ask questions as we go
questions will
along
probably
each
follow
section.
at the end.
Please feel free to send them in.
So your agenda for today is to take a look at the tax revenue issues related to this type of reporting and disclosure, and try to help you build some best practices to help you avoid penalties and reduce your risks of
so you can see we're going to go over the introductory information of personal, which we've done,
or B notices.
Look at internal control and policies.
We'll take a quick look through the issues and try to make sure you're up to date.
Minimizing your tax
we'll
liability.
Take it from there.
The purpose
the
of this
collection
webinar
issues
is
that the IRS has are reported in something called the Tax Gap on the IRS website, and you're welcome to Google that at any time.
Properly
Just simply go into the irs.gov website and use a search box at the top right corner, type in Tax Gap. This is the most recent information they have available, 2001 and 2006, and we wanted to point out some information to you, just to keep things in perspective with regard to the total tax collections per year. It's about 2.6, 2.7, maybe $2.8 billion now. There's a tax gap of about $450 million.
I'd like everyone on the call to ask themselves,
voluntary compliance takes care of about 17% of that, which leaves about $400 million
my accounting department
unaccounted for that
For those
has to
of
be
you
chased
that have answered
down.
yes,
A lot of that has to do with
ask yourself,
underreporting.
how often do I check
Some of that has to do with
that these
business
policies
income.
and procedures are being followed?
122 million starts to focus
As
in
we
on
spend
our
the next
topic
hour and a
today
half together,
with regard to
I would like
1099
you to compare
reporting.
the information I am presenting
Finally, small
to what
corporations
you are
represent
currently
about
doing
19
in your
million
business.
of this tax, and individual income tax is about 36 million. So
As
what
I
we're trying
mentioned
to
earlier,
do
I have been a
is
licensed
isolate the
CPA
issues
since
that
1979.
would
I would
be
also note that
applicable
in
to
addition to
1099
being a
reporting,
CPA
and we've done that
CFO,
for you. There are
I'm
a
a
couple
computer
$100 million
programmer,
worth of issues
and I have
that the
worked as the
government's
head of
trying
an
to
IT
make you
department for 5 years.
responsible for reporting to
You might be asking
them
yourself,
so
what is
they
computer
can
programming
chase it
and
down
understanding
and get it
technology
collected.
have to do with being
The
a
Patient
CPA or
Protection and
CFO,
Affordable Care Act
or with creating policies and procedures?
did eliminate the
Well,
corporate
first, most
exemption
companies
for
create and
1099
maintain
reporting,
their books
but
and records
then
using
when
a software
everybody
program
quote-unquote read it
nowadays,
to find out what
rather
was
than
in
by
it,
hand or using spreadsheets.
the president said, oh, that was
Next,
in there?
there's a
Oh, no, we need to take that back
a
out.
results-oriented
So what we have in the way of a corporate
with
exemption for
programming that is very
1099
helpful in
reporting
developing policies and
still
procedures.
exists. It was only
And lastly,
contemplated
there's
to
a
be removed for a
step-by-step
brief moment, and then it was
logical
put back.
thought process that
The
goes into
corporate
computer
exemption
programming,
does not apply to
which
a couple of
assists in
types
analyzing
of
a
payments,
company's procedures.
and we'll get to that in
So
just a little
everything
bit.
we're
But
talking
for the
about
most part,
is
corporate
logical,
exemption is still
step-by-step,
fine
kind of like
as
a flow chart.
always. Increased penalties did occur.
I'd like to start by defining what internal control is.
The time
According
under
to the
which
Treadway
you
Commission,
pay
according to the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission, commonly known as
So you can see the old fine in the lonely box in the column 2 there, $50.
Broadly defined as
the new
a process.
fine structure is if you get caught up within 30 days of the
directors,
deadline.
Management,
Let's see.
other
Are we still in that 30-day pocket? Yes, we
designed to
are.
provide reasonable
Your
assurance
penalty could be
regarding the
$30
achievement
per
of objectives
late filing.
in the following categories.
The maximum penalties for companies that are classified as large businesses is $250,000 a year. Small businesses have
reliability
gross
of financial
receipts
reporting.
or sales under, I believe it's $5 million. And so they're
Compliance
classified
with
as small businesses, and their
laws and
cap
regulations.
is $75,000.
In this
If
webinar,
you're more than 30 days
we are
out,
going
but
to
get
touch
things
on
taken care of by August 1st,
the
of course, you see it jump to $60
of your operation
and the caps rise.
and
Willful
concentrate
disregard
on
penalty,
the reliability
after August 1st, the penalty rises
your
to
financial
$100
reports
per document.
and
Per document. Now, that's per
compliance
1099, folks.
with IRS
and the caps,
regulations.
look at those, $1,005,000 versus $500,000. Willful disregard penalty, if you simply do not file your information returns, there's a $250 fine per return in addition to the late filing fee
Next,
above.
let's look at the policies and procedures that run your accounting department.
And then there's some additional problems, failure to furnish the statements to the payee. Now you're going to double the fine. So there's a fine for not filing with the IRS, and there's a fine for not filing these with the payee. So just 2 times everything
Authority
above.
to authorize transactions, limited.
Failure to file electronically when required, $100
Job
per item.
are maintained
And
for
fraudulent
all
filings, $5,000 plus
duties and
potential damages payable to the person defrauded.
Segregation
I actually experienced the flip of this in a prior year. I think it was last year.
Developed to support these
the Canadian Revenue Group sent a document to the IRS that said I was paid thousands and thousands of dollars from somebody that doesn't even exist in Canada. And the IRS then added that to my tax return, sent me a notice of penalties and tax due, and if that had been somebody in the United States that had filed that document and they could track back on them, I would be able to pursue them for defrauding me or attempting to do so. And they would have had the $5,000 fine plus the fraud charges.
All-in-one software package.
As it turns out, it was a Canadian firm that doesn't exist, and the Canadian Revenue can't find them, the IRS can't find them, and I'm thinking, okay, that looks like money laundering. I wonder what's going on there. So I requested the IRS pursue that. Of course, they have no obligation to report back to me, and I have no idea whether they did.
If the specialized program has a good accounting program included, or which can be integrated with it,
coming into effect versus being released is a bit different, but it's going into effect in 2014. The new law was released in 2012.
I had a client that was an auto repair shop.
The Foreign
He
Account
needed a
Tax
specialized
Compliance
program
Act.
that allowed him to track
because
parts
it had an
and prepare
impact on a
estimates
number
for
of
customers.
forms,
it also generated bills
forms that
with
we
all
put
of
out
the
to
detail
our
he needed
payees.
and recorded the customer
W-9
payment,
is one of those
tracking
disclosure
accounts
forms,
receivable.
and it was effective.
In his
so we want you to
situation,
know about
we
that, and we'll take a look
generated
at
a
that effect
report
here in
from
just
the
a couple of minutes.
specialized software program
Basically,
on a weekly basis.
It is an attempt to
and
create
input a
transparency on foreign accounts
into the main accounting
where
software program.
a U.S. taxpayer, also known as a U.S.
Who has
resident
access?
or a U.S.
In
non-resident,
his case, the specialized software program was acceptable by all of his employees.
Offshore and is attempting
However,
to hide
the accounting
assets
software was
and the
located
income
on
on
a
those
different computer,
assets in
where
those
only the
offshore
owner
accounts.
and the accounting
That
department
game
had
is
access.
pretty much ending.
In most cases,
UBS
you'll have
took a
one
hit
software
of
package that handles
$700+
everything for
million
you.
of fines because they were actually sending people into the United States to.
In this case, you'll need to set up a system of passwords and access so that each user only has access to the information they need to know. You also want to store the file on a secure computer and back it up on a regular basis. And you need to make sure users do not share their login information with other employees and that passwords are changed on a regular basis. As an aside, when you terminate an employee, in addition to the normal policy of retrieving their keys and company equipment, you also need